Hi, welcome to Evidence for Faith. It's your host, Michael Lane. I'm so glad you're joining us because this is a video, not a podcast, but a video that we're doing to help explain a question that came up on the marine biology trip this year. On our marine biology trip down to the Florida Keys, which we do every April, this past April we did a whole series on questions on apologetics, on seemingly problems with the Bible or contradictions in the Bible, things like that. Well, to explain this one, because we came to a question on if God created just two people, Adam and Eve, how come there's four different types of blood? That's a phenomenal question, which one I had to teach to the students, but to try to do this as a video, or as a podcast, it would not work. We have to do it as a video so I can show you what I was drawing on a marker board down there to help illustrate this whole lesson. So this is not a contradiction in the Bible. This is not that the Bible's wrong scientifically. There is a feasible, easy answer to this, and also the answer, to find the answer, yes, I use the Bible to find out what the Bible says, but to find also part of the answer, I had to go to some genetic papers written by scientists. And these are not Christian people who are writing these things. They're just geneticists, but they explain what happened. And I'll tell you, this is just amazing how this whole thing fits together. It's an amazing lesson. So join me as we get into this answer of the question, if God created just two people, why are there four types of blood? Are you ready? Let's go. You see, there's four different types of blood. There's, maybe you know your blood type. I know my blood type. Being a teacher in biology, I used to teach this people and find out what blood types they have. Each of my students in biology classes would find out what their blood type was. And there's different ways of doing it, but we used to teach that. I always thought it was a good thing to know that you should know your blood type. You go in the military, you learn your blood types on your dog tags and stuff. But anyway, there's four types of blood, and you probably know them just by heart, most of you, I'm sure. There's type A, you can be type B, you can be AB, ooh, and then you can be O. Why don't we have a C? Well, we don't. So it's A, B, AB, and O. Those are the four types. Now, if God only created two people to start everything, and then they had offspring, and those offspring had offspring, and it's gone down to we have today, there's how does this come out to be correct scientifically, that the Bible would be correct? Well, to answer the question, we have to go into a little bit of genetics. Now, I hope this does not scare you off from turning off the video at this point, but I'm going to teach you a little bit of just basic genetics here because this is important to answer the question. You got to know this to answer the question. Now, I'm going to show you a slide. It's going to appear right now, and we have this slide here showing that you're going to see the word right at the top there saying genotype. Now, don't say, oh my gosh, what's genotype? Genotype is a code, basically just a code that geneticists use to trace genes, to trace like alleles on genes, to figure out what the thing is. It's a code that we mark it in. So we don't have to write down tall all the time, or purple all the time, or just, any type of genetic trait, eye color blue. These are just codes that we use. Now, if we have a genotype, there's another term some of you, I'm sure, are familiar with. It's called phenotype. What's a phenotype? A phenotype is what is expressed, what's visible. As I just mentioned before, you can have a genotype that could be written down that you would be, say this plant's going to be tall. Well, when you look at the plant, you see it's tall. That's its phenotype. To write it down on a code and on a paper, you would use its genotype. So genotype is like the secret code, if you will, and the phenotype is what is being expressed, what you actually see. Now, let's talk about the different genotypes that we have of blood cells that we see, the type of blood that people have. First of all, we'll start with type A. Let's go alphabetically. So type A, if you are type A blood, your genotype is going to look, it could be one of two things. First of all, you're going to see the word homozygous. Now, don't let these like alphabet soup terms scare you. Homozygous just means they're basically identical. So if for type A, if you're homozygous A, another way of saying it is you're purebred. If you have a homozygous or if you're purebred A, the way you would write this down in a genotype, the code that we use in genetics, for blood we use a capital I for the trait you get from mom and the trait you get from dad. We use a capital I for just blood, just the way it goes. Why we do that is beyond what we're going to talk about now. But notice that there's a superscript behind each capital A. Now, why there's two genes here? You see, we have a capital I superscript A, capital I superscript A. Okay, you get one capital IA from mom and you get one from dad. So that's how this works genetically. So this is not hard. Your parents, you get half your genetics from your mom, you get half your genetics from your dad. So in blood, you get one gene from your mom, you get one gene from your dad. And we just put them together here as we write the genotype. And it comes out capital I, superscript A, capital I, superscript A. If that's what the case is, you're homozygous A-type blood. But you can also be type A and be what we call heterozygous. Now, stay with me. Heterozygous means that they're both not the same. There's a difference in them. And as you can see, you can be a type A blood. It's called heterozygous A. And here you get one trait from the same mom, the capital I with the superscript A. And then you get the second capital I from dad, but oh, it's different. There's a little lowercase I there. Now, we'll get into this more later on, but just to help you right now, what does it mean? It means it's going to be for type O. So, but type O is recessive. The dominant one is going to be type A. So we have A being expressed. So you can be heterozygous A, and you'll see you have a superscript A and a superscript I. Okay? Now, the same thing goes for B-type blood. If you have B-type blood, you can be homozygous. In other words, you're going to have two capital I's, one from mom, one from dad, and they're both going to be B, capital B as a superscript. That's how that works. But you can also be a heterozygous B, and that would be mom or dad. One of them they weren't the same. One is a capital B, and the other one is a lowercase I. Remember, I is recessive. The other one is going to be expressed. It's going to be the dominant one that you will see. Now, to be AB type blood, if you are AB type blood, feel a little special because there's not that many of you in the United States. In other countries, it's a very popular blood type, but here in the States, it's not that much. Now, to be a type, your blood type is AB, that means that your dad or your mom, one of them had to give you a B type, so an I with a B, and the other parent had to give you the I with the A. So you have both A and B, they blend together, and so it's called AB type blood. Now, there's one more type of blood, and it's type O. We mentioned it before. O is expressed with a lowercase I. Thus, we have I from each parent, so there's going to be two capital I's. One will be with a lowercase I, and the other one will be a lowercase I. If this is your blood type, you are an O. That's the type of blood type you have. So I hope you followed me through that. It's a little complicated with all these things, but now we're going to get into how do you use these codes, these genotypes to figure out what we have. Excuse me, got to have a sip of my tea right now. So let's move on. As we said, looking at this slide here, one gene you get from your father, one gene you get from your mother. We've covered that. But now we get to do the thing, if those of you have had biology, or maybe you did this even in a life science course or something in middle school, college students probably all know how to do this. Remember doing Punnett squares? Or in some places they're called Punnett squares. Depends on where you're from. It's not a nightmare. Actually, it's a puzzle. It's sort of fun. I love playing these things. And you can figure out from what if one generation is the parents of each one, if you know what their genotypes are, you can figure out what the offspring will be. And you do this using these genetic pairs with these Punnett squares. That's how you do it. So just using an example. Now, we're going to use T for a tall plant, mother plant or something like that, or you can use an adult or something like that. If you want to call it, we're just making this simple. Mother, we're going to say that she's tall. Father, she's going to be tall also, and stuff like this. But notice we have the father on top of the square. So when you do a Punnett square with one gene, there's going to be 4 boxes underneath. Now, you take the father, he's on top. Now, Gregor Mendel, the monk who figured this out in the 1800s, this is brilliant. He did this with pea, but we've used this with all sorts of things, all sorts of animals and plants, making these types of squares and stuff. Now, what we see on the top line of this, before the four squares are below, but on top is the genotype of, in this case, we're putting the father. Father is usually on the top line. Now, remember, he has two different traits. So we have the father being a capital T on one trait, and the other one is a lowercase t, which is recessive. And that would be for short on the others, his other trait. Mom, who's over on the side, mother is going to be exactly the same. She's going to be with a capital T, and her second gene that she's carrying from her other parent would be from a lowercase t. Now, both of them would be tall because the lowercase t is recessive. Thus, you'll see both mom and dad on top and on the side both have a large t and a lowercase t in their genetics. It's just they got one from one parent, one from another. Now, the way you fill in a Punnett square is really simple. We'll just start with the father, gene 1, right at the top there. And what you do, you just take that capital T and go down into both boxes. Capital T down, capital T down. Then you go to the father, gene 2, and it's lowercase. Lowercase t there, lowercase t in the second square. Now to figure out mother's side, we take her side, and gene 1 from mother is a capital T. Just take that capital T across, right in that first square there. I've got it shown here as in red, the mother's gene's in red. So you have a red T that's capitalized, and on the other one, father gene, underneath father gene 2, you have another capital red T, because that's the mother's genes going across. Then you take the mother's genes below, and you go across again, and it's a lowercase t. So on both those bottom squares, you put a lowercase t. That's a Punnett square. Now you got to do is just read it. You can read the genotypes. You have two capital T's. You have, in one square, you have two different squares with a capital T and a lowercase t. And then the bottom right-hand square, you have two lowercase t's. That's the genotypes. Now the phenotype would be with two capital T's. That's tall. That's a homozygous tall, because they're both the same. Father gene 2, underneath that, the top right square that we have here, you have a lowercase black t and then a capital red T. That's tall because the capital one is going to be dominant. It shows. So that's a tall person also. Going back, or going straight below, you'll see we have two lowercase t's, and both one from black from the father and red from the mother. That's a short person. There is no gene for tall. And if you keep going clockwise as we're going, go straight to the left, you'll see the other square we haven't filled in. You have a black capital T from dad and a lowercase red T from mom. Thus, that person also is going to be tall. Thus, what we get, 3 of the 4 boxes that we end here in the square, 3 of the 4, you're not talking about the parents now, we're talking about the offspring. 3 of the 4 are going to be tall. So 75% are tall, 25% are short. That's the phenotypes that we just told you about. So that's how you use these things. That's how a Punnett squared works. And we need to use these to try to figure out the blood types, going back with Adam and Eve and how we got 4 types of blood. We had to get through this technical stuff first to help you understand how we can answer the question. So I hope you're still with me. I hope you haven't turned me off at this point or fallen asleep. Genetics is not that hard. It's a lot of fun, actually. I love working with genetics. Now we're going to put another slide up right now to let you see, talking about specifically Adam and Eve. Now if Adam, we're just going to throw a hypothetical out here. If Adam was blood type A, and if he was heterozygous for that, in other words, he has a capital A from one gene, and on the other gene, he has a lowercase I. The A is going to be the dominant one, so he's going to be A on that one. So he's type A. And say Eve, well, say she was type B blood, that God created her with B blood. So he created Adam with A, he created Eve with B, so you can see there's a capital B and a lowercase I, which is one for O, but she's not expressing it, so the B is the one that's expressed. And now if we do a Punnett square with those 2 types, 2 heterozygous one for A, one for B. They're both hets. As we do this, and you look at the chart down below, underneath Adam 1, you'll see that there's an AB from Adam and Eve, the first square down. And if you go right below that, you'll see that they're from Adam, it's a capital A, and then from Eve, it was a lowercase I. That is just plain I. It's another, just like what he was, it's a het I. If you go back to the top right now, under Adam with the lowercase I, okay, he drops that one down. So in that box, it would be a lowercase I. Then you see a capital B for the other one. Well, a capital B with an I, B is going to be the dominant. It's going to be the one that's expressed. So that person is going to be B-type blood. But then if you go and you take the I from each one, notice that they're both hets. So each Adam, both Eve and Adam both have a recessive I, which would be, that would be type O. You put those together, they're lowercase I, that's O-type blood. Now, right off, don't lose me here, but right off, you can see this works. It appears to be the solution, because if Adam is a het for type A blood, if Eve was a het for type B blood, God lets them mate and produce their offspring. You'll see that we have an AB, we have an A, we have a B, and we have an O. So we get all four blood types. And there, it seems to be the answer. And I mean seems to be the answer. To be totally honest with you, I taught it this way for many years back in the 90s. For several years, I taught this is the answer to this question. Until one time, when I got done teaching this lesson with a bunch of individuals, different ages, a man came up to me afterwards and he says, I like how you use the Punnett square to explain this, that you can see the four different blood types, but he says, I believe you have an error. And I said, where have I got an error? He said, there is a problem. And I couldn't understand where the problem is. I said, well, this shows all four types. Tell me where you think my problem is. What he said, he says you need to go back and look at Genesis chapter 2, verse 22 a little more carefully, because you made an error. So I did. I went back and I looked at Genesis 2:22, which you can see on the screen here, and it says, and the rib that the Lord God had taken from the man, he made into a woman and brought her to the man. And when I read this carefully, thinking I've got a mistake in my thing, which I did, what I just showed you is not correct. That's an error. And here is where I made my error. I made them both Adam and Eve totally different. That one was A blood, one was B, and they were both type, they carried recessive for O. It can't be, and I'll show you why that can't be. Because for one, God made Eve out of Adam. So he took some of the genetics, if you want to look at it this way and read the Bible this way, he took some of the genetics out of Adam to build Eve. Now, I remember saying this one time and someone asked me right away, they said, so God made Eve as a clone of Adam? No. Eve is not a clone of Adam. For one way I can prove that to you is Adam is male. It's an XY. Eve is obviously XX. She's female. Do you notice that if a male is XY and God is taking out of the X, he has at his supply X and Y. So if he takes the X out of Adam, all he's got to do is duplicate that X that came from Adam, and it makes a female. You notice that? Notice, if I lost you, look at it this way. If you have a female who has XX, you cannot make a male from that, because there's no Y gene to make any type of cloning or anything genetic manipulation. You can't make a male from that because you need the Y gene. Yet, males like Adam here, XY, the X is existing. All you got to do is duplicate the X in the other person and you can get a female. Interesting, isn't it? Is this a coincidence? Don't think so. But Adam and Eve must have had different blood types. And as you're going to see, science is going to back this up. It's going to back up what I'm saying here. Now, most geneticists, most theologians that have studied this with a science background also, I've read so many different papers on this from those type of people, and they say that Adam and Eve would have been AB type blood. Both of them AB. Well, that's possible, I suppose. It very well could be. They could be AB. That would be with a capital A and a capital B in their genetics. Or God could have done this. He could have made Adam be the AB, but Eve, maybe he only took the A from Eve, like I just showed you with the X and the Y. Maybe he took the A out of Adam and just duplicated it, and so we have Eve was an A, capital A, capital A. He just repeats what's there. Or if, say, for instance, she was B blood. Well, Adam is AB, so now he takes the B part from Adam and just duplicates it. Now you get a homozygous B. Now, either way you want to work this, even if they're both AB, whatever you're going to do, you're going to be able to get A, B, and AB. That's how it's going to work. There's no way of getting O out of this. Because Adam, like you can see from the chart here, Adam would be AB. Eve could be one of two things. Or actually one of three things. She could be AB. She could be a homozygous A. She could be a homozygous B. There's no O. So we still have a problem. Showing you now on a chart, these are the Punnett squares of what we just did. Now, on the top square we see Adam is AB, Eve is AB. Notice if you fill out the whole chart here, the Punnett square, you're going to end up with 25%, or 1/4 of them are going to be A, 50% or half is going to be AB, 25% would be B. Now that's feasible. It could work. I don't think that's what happens though. If Eve was an homozygous A, Adam's AB, that's still going to give you the A and the B. You're going to see we see A. Eve is being a homozygous. Now when you fill out the square, you're going to have two homozygous A, so 50% are homozygous A, and 50% are AB. So that's another way of looking at it. Or if Eve was a B, are you starting to understand why I had to do this with a video instead of just talking about this? If Eve is a homozygous B, if God used the B gene out of her and duplicated it, you'll see that it's basically the same thing we just saw before. Instead of A, now it's B. We have an AB and an AB, and then you have a BB, BB. So 50% of the people are B type, 50% are AB. Now you'll notice with Eve then, you get 50% B type and 50% AB. Well, you might be wondering, well, how in the world do you get an A? Take the offspring that they had. Have two of their offspring who are both AB type blood, and you're going to get an A again. So this does work feasibly in this aspect, but still, we don't have an O. Where does the O type come from? And this is where I was really puzzled by this. Now, I do believe that man was correct when he told me I had this wrong, that Adam and Eve were both AB. I don't think that is correct, but I do think that Eve was probably a homozygous A or a B. But anyway, this works no matter what. But the thing is, you're still not going to get an O out of this. So how in the world do we get this elusive O? Here I had to turn to science papers. I had to read genetic papers on this. The factor for O, come to find out, is a mutation of A. Yes, you heard me right. It's a mutation. The type of mutation, it's called a point mutation. It's shown with a capital I and a lowercase I, as we mentioned before, but it's a mutation of the A gene. They have found this out genetically, and it's important to note that the mutation that's here is a loss of information. Even though we're getting a new type of blood, it's a loss of information. Thus, it's called a point mutation. This means the gene information was lost. Not like in evolution, you keep adding genes to get different things. That's not the case here. And to get O-type blood, you had to have A, and there was a mutation that formed a long time ago of how that worked. Now let me just show you with another illustration. Looking at 4 red blood cells. Type A, you have a type B, you have an AB, and then you have an O. Now you notice the blood cell itself, the little red circle, has little dots on it. These are the anti-Bs and anti-A things and stuff by colors. Notice the color. And on A, you have these purple colors, these antigens. On B, you have what's called looking as a green antigen. Now notice, you cannot mix these two together. If you're A-type blood and somebody gives you B-type blood, your blood's not going to mix because they're total opposites. They're going to collide, and it's going to be very painful, and you can die from that. Notice the person who's AB. They have both antigens for both those, A and B. Thus, if you have AB blood and you're hurt in an accident and they need to give you blood, somebody who's A-type blood could give you blood because you've got that color of antigen. See the purple? It has the purple. If you are in an accident and you're AB, they could give you B blood because you have that. The best thing, of course, is to get AB to try and match it perfectly. But notice the O-type blood. O-type blood doesn't have anything. The antigen is missing. What it is, it's a mutation. This point mutation actually forms, and it prevents the formation of an enzyme called N-acetylgalactosamine, and it can't make that. And it's just a mutation that happens where this little molecule cannot be made. And if it can't be made, you end up with these antigens not working right, and you end up with type O. Now, you might be wondering, where can I read about stuff like this? Well, I do have a couple of sources I can tell you that I looked up in doing this. Medicover Genetics, which is a magazine. It's not a Christian publication. It's a magazine, but it's a genetics professional journal. It's the September 14th, 2022 edition. They have an article about this, about the formation of O-type blood through a mutation of the A. You can also get information from the National Library of Medicine, and that's the June 4th, 2020 edition. There's an article in there called, quote, a 24 base pair deletion in ABO genes causes hereditary splice of a defect, unquote. I mean, that's quite an article name. Also, you want a Christian publication that supports this also, you can do that. You can go to the Creation Ministries, December 20 of 2018. They have an article in there on what was Adam and Eve's blood type. You can find it in there. So I looked up, there's many other articles I looked up on this, many going back into the early 2000s when I was actually researching this, and they were finding these kind of point mutations out. There's a lot. If you do a professional, go to a big university library, you can find a lot of these on that. Now, to help you understand how this works, let me just use myself as an example. On blood type and use my own family for this one. I am type A. And I know I either have to be, since I'm type A, I have to be either a heterozygous A or I got to be a homozygous A. Well, I know what I am. I know my genotype, and I am a homozygous A. I am a purebred A. How about that? I'm a purebred. Boy, makes me sound like I'm worth more or something. I don't know. But anyway, how do I know that? I know that because I know my wife's blood type. My wife's blood type is she's an O. Thus, she only carries from her mom and her dad, she got the little case I's. I, from my mom and my dad, got only the capital A's. So, if you were to do a Punnett square, which I did even before my kids were born, I tried to figure out what our blood types are. I found out that, because I knew what my parents were, and even my grandparents. In one case, I found out that, and my wife knew some of hers, so I could figure it out. But you could figure it out yourself, pretty much, a lot of this, what you might be. In my case, I'm a homozygous A. My wife is a mutant. I love saying that. My wife is a mutant. She's a cute mutant, but she's a mutant. And she is lowercase I, lowercase I. Now, the reason I know that is because all of the children we have produced are A-type blood. If I was a het, our children, 50% of our children, 50% for each child, 50% of chance of them being a O-type blood. None of my kids are O. Every single one is A. Thus, I have to be a homozygous A. She is a mutant. She's an O. So here's a little chart just showing you how this would work. If on the top square you see this is what we have. My genotype and my wife's genotype is there. All the offspring have the capital A in it. Thus, it's dominant. All my kids are going to be A. If I was a het, and Denise is, of course, a mutant, you would see then 50% of my kids would only have the lowercase I in both cases. They would get from me, but that's not what happened. So that's the answers to our question. How did the O-type blood come about? How did it come? It's because a mutation happened. God created Adam and Eve, and he created, what I believe is he created them to have either A, B, or AB type blood. And that's how it was for a while. But after the fall, when man sinned against God in chapter 3 of Genesis, and the world became corrupted, that's when disease, all sorts of mutations and disease and death and terrible things happening to the world, and the earth is still groaning in its pains of all this sin caused by Adam and Eve sinning at the beginning. They brought sin into the world. The whole world's got it. So God created A, B, and AB, but the O is a mutation. So he didn't create a mutation. A mutation happened after the fall of man. So sometime after Adam and Eve started having kids, and most theologians that I've approached with this believe, and even some geneticists who are Christians, they believe that the mutation entered the human race somewhere before the flood, Noah's flood. It definitely had to be in there before the Tower of Babel story in Genesis 11. But most theologians believe the mutation formed somewhere in those lifespans that you see before of people living for hundreds of years before the flood. That's how you get it. God made A-type blood, he made B-type blood, he made AB-type blood. Gave them the capabilities for that. O is a result of the sinful world. It's a mutation. It was not God's design, it happened. And mutations are what we keep seeing going on. And the longer we live, the more mutations that we keep seeing happening on this planet. So that's the answer to the question. I hope you've enjoyed this. I hope it didn't kill you with this lesson. And if you have questions, go ahead and contact us. But we thank you so much. And if this video has helped you or has impacted you in any way, we would love to hear that. And also, we would love if you would pray for us here at Evidence for Faith. And if God puts it upon your heart to support us, we would love that also. So we can continue to put videos and podcasts out and books and things like that out for people. So until we meet again, take care and may God bless.